Clyde Loakes is deputy leader at the London Borough of Waltham Forest, and he's been a key player in improving conditions for cycling and walking in the area. The London Cycling Campaign voted him Cycling Champion of the Year 2 years running. So Clyde, you were involved in delivering the Mini Holland programme back in 2015, funded by £30 million from Mayor Boris Johnson to improve streets and cycling infrastructure. But you faced up to significant opposition, particularly in Waltham Stowe Village. Now that those changes have been in place for 5 years, what has been the impact on modes of travel and on local businesses?
I mean, we're seeing increased levels of people moving around by active travel, and you can see and feel that as you walk around the areas that we transformed as part of the original Mini Holland funding programme in Walthamstow Village, Black Horse, around Hoe Street, so you can see and feel it, and you're starting to see some of the data now kind of push through into some of the Transport for London statistics, in some of the DFT statistics that they kind of publish annually around walking and cycling as well. So, that anecdote backed up by their evidence. So that's really, really powerful. Dr. Rachel Aldridge's also done some studies that suggesting that in the villages, or what are now referred to as low traffic neighbourhoods, you're starting to see car ownership decline even further than perhaps it would have done anyway as things move forward. So you're starting to see some real kind of anecdote evidence coming together to demonstrate the full value of what you can see happen in a low traffic neighbourhood. Businesses are always a challenge when you kind of start to challenge the way they have operated for many, many years. But the kind of level of engagement that we invested into talking with businesses in the areas that we wanted to develop our original low traffic neighbourhoods has paid off. And you are seeing confidence from those businesses. And certainly, as we've moved through the kind of lockdowns and the challenges that we've all faced over the past 15 months or so, actually the value of transforming some of these traditional shopping parades back to how the Victorians would have envisaged them when they laid out these residential neighbourhoods, to prioritise pedestrians, to prioritise people arriving by active modes, not a motor vehicle. They've really kind of paid dividends over that period, with people being able to explore and utilise their local neighbourhood, not just for exercise, but as a means of concentrating their shopping and what minimal leisure activity they were able to continue with during those periods. That 15-minute neighbourhood, which has become a cornerstone of what Waltham Forest is about now.
And do you have actual data that might be able to convince retailers in other parts of London that improving the quality of streets is better for business than just unlimited car access?
I mean, there is huge amounts of data out there now, whether it's the Transport for London data, whether it's Living Streets data, whether it's London Council's data, and you can go onto our Enjoy Waltham Forest website and you can see the reams of data and the perception survey data where businesses constantly overestimate the amount of their customers who arrive by car as opposed to who arrive by foot, by bike and by public transport. And of course, the data also demonstrates that the more welcoming you make a place for people to spend time as a pedestrian, the less worried they are about their very young children that they might have to grip hold of to stop them running into a street because of the amount of motor traffic. The more they come back and the more they spend over the course of a week, over the course of a month, over the course of a year. So, all of that data, all of those perception surveys, all of that anecdote is there, and you can go global with that. We are seeing city after city starting to produce that kind of level of data and evidence to suggest prioritise the shopper, not the mode of transportation that they arrive by. Prioritise the shopper. They want space, they want it clean, they want the pavements wide, and they will spend more money, they will spend more time in your locality.
you had some what we now call low traffic neighbourhood schemes in place before COVID-19 came along. So what was the response to those at the time? And what other changes have you got in train as a part of the Streetspace programme?
Well, all of our what we call villages then became livable neighbourhoods, now are low traffic neighbourhoods. They were all kind of consulted on, and every single one that we rolled out at the time had the support of the local population to take forward. Now, clearly, there will always be, people who are uncomfortable, who don't like change, and who don't like change at pace. They feel the need to be constantly convinced of these things being necessary. And one of our kind of key criteria was that we wanted to do stuff at pace because we knew the evidence was on our side, whether it's from a public health perspective, an air quality perspective, congestion perspective, economy perspective, climate emergency perspective. Even before people were talking in the terminology of climate emergency, we knew we had to do something because the decades of tinkering with trying to reduce car demand on our neighbourhoods, on our residential streets, was clearly failing. At best we might have been slowing vehicles down, but we weren't achieving the kind of mode shift that we all knew we had to achieve for sustainable transport to become the norm and to unlock the potential of our neighbourhoods. So they were all consulted on, and they were all, are now well established. And of course, what we saw after that was those that hadn't supported schemes, who had rejected schemes, and there was only two, the residents campaigning to come back to us to get those schemes back on the table because they saw what was happening around them and they wanted a bit of that action. Who wouldn't want that extra planting? Who wouldn't want, the thousands of vehicle movements a day that was going down their residential street being removed from their residential street? Who would not want their children to be able to walk to school far more safely than they were previously? So, who wouldn't want those benefits? Who wouldn't want to be able to talk to their neighbour at a modal filter that had now been planted up for 10 minutes as they dropped off their children at school? So, starting to see real kind of ownership and campaigning to get them in. And thankfully, just before lockdown, we managed to get those two final schemes over the line. Since the pandemic hit, we have introduced a number of London Streetspace schemes in the south of the borough in particular. And of course there is concern from residents because they haven't had the traditional levels of engagement and consultation which we would normally have done in advance of introducing these schemes. However, it's helpful to try out a different approach to delivering these kinds of schemes. E.g., you put them in with softer measures, temporary measures, and you consult whilst it's in, so people can experience the scheme before making a final decision. And we as a council can monitor and see where some of the challenges may still be, and so we can develop the scheme before coming back with a final scheme. However, we in this country do emphasise consultation to the nth degree. Our ability to move things forward, even though we know they're the right things to move forward, does seem to take a long time. And, we do confuse consultation with referendum constantly in this country. And I think that is something, from a kind of cultural and behaviour sense, we need to kind of address going forward.
What's your advice to councillors in other boroughs who are facing a backlash from motorists concerned that road diets and LTNs have been installed without, as you say, without very much consultation in many places? And do you think that is going to hinder street improvements in the future?
I think low traffic neighbourhoods, livable neighbourhoods, our villages, have been with us in one shape or form for many years. I mean, we used to call them just bus gates. And we used to put a bus gate in a residential road to stop through traffic on the back of residents saying, we don't want all this rat running now. And Hackney were at the forefront of that many years ago. I think the difference has been the pace of change as people have realised the scale of the problem. You know, and you've seen some of those DFT stats that, you know, that suggest with kind of sat navs and the emergence of apps on mobile phones that have seen a huge increase in the amount of rat running through residential streets as people can find their ways through to bypass some of that traditional traffic management infrastructure, such as traffic lights, for example, that has, you know, has controlled the flow of traffic. You've got to stick with it though. You know, these are the right things to do. These are the right interventions to make to safeguard our neighbourhoods going forward, to contribute to arresting some of the air quality challenges we have, to get more people out of their cars, particularly for those short base car journeys. You know, and school streets are a great tool in this debate as well, and a great intervention to roll out. They're good for biodiversity because you create more space for planting. They're good for the economy because you can revive some of our traditional shopping parades and smaller town centres. You know, good for public health because more people are exercising more often, building it into their daily routines, such as walking to school, walking to the shops, cycling to school, cycling to shops, than they were before. So these are the right interventions to make. So you've got to stick with it. And of course, you know, one of the potential positives out of how we've had to live our lives and, you know, undertake our work over the past 15 months, with more and more people having to work at home, is, I think, a greater appreciation of our neighbourhoods has really come to the fore. And, you know, people won't be returning into central London office blocks in the way that they used to work before the pandemic. More people, I believe, will be working from home more often. So what's on their doorstep is going to become even more important to them. And they're not going to want to look out of a window and see thousands of, you know, non-local cars passing by their house on a daily basis. They are going to want and expect something different moving forward. And they're going to be more challenging of local politicians, planners, highways engineers to come up with schemes that kind of reinforce their neighbourhood as their neighbourhood rather than someone else's rat run. Clearly, there is, you know, a lot of concern, you know, sometimes legitimate concern with how some of the schemes have been rolled out, but we cannot go forward with arresting the climate emergency. We cannot go forward with issues around air quality without challenging how we move around this great city and many other towns and cities across the UK. You know, we have to make a step change. And by prioritising and getting more people walking and cycling who can, we create the road space for those who still need to use motor vehicles to get about. But, you know, no one's ever said, you know, that how we judge anything is how quickly you get from A to B. It's your ability to get from A to B that is important. If we say it's based on speed, then we would be knocking houses down again to kind of create routes into residential areas. And no one says we should be doing that. No, it's about quality, and it's about equality of access to the road space for those who need it most, and for those who don't need to use a car to be walking and cycling most that they can in their day-to-day lives.
Thank you very much, Councillor Loakes, for your leadership in improving London streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you.